how cruise lines destroyed Caribbean tourism while making billions. Every year, 30 million cruise passengers visit the Caribbean, 30 million tourists. The islands should be rich. They're not. The average cruise passenger spends $50 per port visit. The average hotel guest spends $1,500 per trip. Cruise ships bring volume, hotels bring revenue, and the Caribbean chose wrong. This is the story of how cruise lines convinced Caribbean governments to build their entire tourism strategy around ships, how Carnival Corporation gained monopoly control over Caribbean ports, and why islands are now trapped in a system that extracts billions while leaving local economies with almost nothing. The pitch, the ports, the numbers that don't add up, and why it's too late to change. 1970s, Caribbean tourism was small but growing. Americans and Europeans flew to Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad. They stayed in locally owned hotels. They ate at local restaurants. They hired local guides. Tourism revenue stayed in the Caribbean. It created jobs. It built the middle class. Then the cruise industry had a different idea. The pitch to Caribbean governments was brilliant. We'll bring thousands of tourists. You don't need to build hotels. You don't need to worry about marketing. We'll bring them directly to your ports. All you need to do is build a pier, and maybe waive some taxes. Caribbean governments loved it. Building a cruise port cost $50–100 million. Building hotel infrastructure cost billions. Cruise lines promised volume, hundreds of thousands of visitors per year. Small islands that got 50,000 hotel guests annually could suddenly claim 500,000 cruise visitors. The numbers looked amazing. Tourism statistics exploded. Politicians could claim they'd transformed their economies. So, islands competed to attract cruise ships. Jamaica built cruise ports in Ocho Rios and Montego Bay. St. Lucia built Castries and Port Soufriere. Antigua built St. John's. Barbados, Grenada, Dominica. Everyone built ports. The cruise lines had them exactly where they wanted. Here's what Caribbean governments didn't understand. Cruise passengers aren't tourists. They're captive customers of the cruise line. A hotel tourist stays 5 to 7 nights, eats 15 to 20 meals at local restaurants, books local tours, shops at local stores, hires local transport, stays in local accommodation. Total spending, $1,000–2,000 per trip. Most of it stays in the local economy. A cruise passenger docks for 6 to 8 hours. The ship provides breakfast before departure and lunch after return. The cruise line books the tours through their preferred partners. Shopping is limited to cruise line-approved vendors who pay commission back to the ship. Total spending in local economy, $40–70 per visit. Most of it goes to cruise-approved vendors. But it gets worse. Cruise lines negotiated Homeport agreements with Caribbean governments. These agreements gave them incredible power. The cruise line promises to bring X number of ships per year. In exchange, the government agrees to tax exemptions, port fee discounts, and exclusivity arrangements. What does exclusivity mean? The cruise line gets to control who operates tours, who runs shops near the port, who provides ground transportation. Local businesses that want access to cruise passengers have to pay the cruise line. Commission fees of 30–50% on every transaction. So a local tour operator charges $100 for a waterfall tour. They pay $40–50 to the cruise line. After expenses, they make maybe $10–20 profit. The cruise line makes $40–50 for doing nothing. They didn't operate the tour. They just controlled access to the passengers. This happens across every transaction. Taxis, restaurants, shops, attractions. The cruise line takes a cut of everything. Local businesses get scraps. But Caribbean governments didn't have a choice. Once you build a cruise port, you're locked in. The infrastructure is useless without the ships. And there's only one cruise industry. It's controlled by 3 companies. Carnival Corporation owns Carnival, Princess, Holland America, Costa, Cunard, Seabourn. 9 cruise lines. 40% of global market share. Royal Caribbean owns Royal Caribbean, Celebrity, Azamara, Silversea. 4 cruise lines. 25% of market share. Norwegian Cruise Line owns Norwegian Oceania, Regent 7 Seas, 3 cruise lines. 10% of market share. 3 companies. 75% of the global cruise industry. And they all talk to each other. When Caribbean islands try to raise port fees, the cruise lines threaten to leave. We'll send our ships to Mexico instead, or Florida, or another island that appreciates us. Islands cave immediately. They can't afford to lose the ships. Their ports would sit empty. Politicians would get blamed. So port fees stay low. Tax exemptions continue. The cruise lines keep their monopoly. Let's look at the actual numbers. Jamaica, 2019, pre-COVID. Hotel tourists, 2.1 million visitors. Average spending, $200 per trip. Total revenue, $2.5 billion. Cruise tourists, 1.9 million visitors. Average spending, $50 per visit. Total revenue, $95 million, almost the same number of visitors. One generates 26 times more revenue.
But Jamaican politicians brag about 4 million total tourists. They combine hotel and cruise numbers as if they're equivalent.
They're not. Cruise passengers are worth 4% of hotel guests economically. Every other Caribbean island has similar numbers. Cruise passengers dominate the statistics. Hotel guests dominate the revenue. But governments keep building cruise ports and neglecting hotel infrastructure.
Why? Because cruise lines are easier. You build a pier, you waive some taxes, the ships come automatically. Hotels require investment, infrastructure, marketing, quality control, training, water systems, sewage treatment, beach maintenance. It's harder, more expensive, more work.
So politicians take the easy route, build another cruise port, announce another ship contract, show the tourist arrival statistics.
And the local economy gets nothing. The environmental damage is catastrophic. A cruise ship with 5,000 passengers generates as much waste as a town of 50,000 people. All of it gets dumped near Caribbean reefs. Cruise ships use heavy fuel oil, the dirtiest, cheapest marine fuel. One ship produces more sulfur emissions than 1 million cars. Caribbean reefs are dying. Partly from climate change, partly from cruise ship pollution that governments allow because they're desperate for the ships. Then COVID-19 hit. March 2020. The cruise industry stopped completely. Every ship docked. 0 passengers. Caribbean governments panicked. The cruise revenue disappeared. Politicians realized how dependent they'd become. But hotel tourism? It recovered faster. By late 2021, hotels were filling up again. People still wanted Caribbean vacations. They just didn't want cruise ships during a pandemic. Cruise tourism didn't recover until 2023, and when it did, the cruise lines demanded even better deals. Lower port fees, more tax breaks, more exclusivity, because they knew Caribbean governments had no choice. The ports were built, the debt was incurred, the islands needed the ships. Some Caribbean leaders are finally questioning the model. Barbados recently announced they're limiting cruise ships and focusing on hotel tourism.
We can't survive on cruise passengers spending $50.
But it's difficult to change. The ports exist, the debt is real, the cruise lines control the schedule, and hotel infrastructure takes years to build. Investors are hesitant. The Caribbean has crime problems, infrastructure problems, service quality problems. It's easier to keep taking cruise ships and hoping for the best. The cruise lines didn't force anyone. Caribbean governments made these deals voluntarily. They wanted the easy tourism, the big visitor numbers, the photo opportunities with cruise executives. Now they're trapped. 30 million visitors, billions in cruise line profits, and Caribbean islands getting $50 per passenger after the cruise line takes their cut. The ports sit empty 5 days a week. When ships arrive, passengers flood the small port areas, overwhelm local infrastructure, spend almost nothing, then leave. Local businesses complain they make more money on days when no ships arrive. The few hotel guests have room to move, feel comfortable, spend money. But when 3 ships dock simultaneously, 10,000 passengers overwhelm the town. Crowds, noise, complaints, and almost no spending. This is Caribbean tourism in 2025, dominated by an industry that extracts billions while giving back almost nothing. The cruise lines win. Their shareholders win. Caribbean governments can show impressive tourist arrival statistics, but Caribbean people, they're still poor. Working service jobs that pay minimum wage, watching massive ships float by, knowing those thousands of passengers will barely spend anything. 30 million visitors, and the Caribbean is still broke. That's what happens when you optimize for volume instead of value, when you choose easy statistics over hard economics. The cruise lines played the game perfectly. They convinced Caribbean governments to build expensive ports, then dictated terms once the ports were built. Now the islands can't afford to say no. The cruise lines know it. Caribbean leaders know it. And nothing will change. Because changing would mean admitting the last 40 years were a mistake. So the ships keep coming. The passengers keep spending nothing. And the Caribbean keeps pretending cruise tourism is real tourism. While Carnival Corporation reports $3 billion in annual profits, Caribbean islands struggle to maintain roads, schools, and hospitals. The cruise line model works perfectly, just not for the Caribbean.